Motion and Akiflow are both powerful planning tools, helping to manage tasks, events, and also with automations and some AI in both tools at varying scales. I personally work for Morgan and have used Morgan for years, but I wanted to compare Motion and Akiflow's features and what use cases they're best for. In this comparison video, I'm going to use Google Calendar as the main source calendar. So I've got my main calendar, which is orange. I have additional events in purple, my personal in blue, and then I have the Google tasks in gray. You can see I've got a Google task up here on Wednesday, and that is response to community user. If we have a look at Akiflow, you can see all of these events are appearing inside of the calendar as you would expect. And if we come into Motion, we can see the same thing, but there are a couple of visual differences. First, this catch-up event, if I click in, is free, whereas this other event for work is busy. In Google Calendar, when I click, you can see it's free and work meeting event is busy. Google doesn't show any visual differences. Akiflow doesn't show any visual differences, but Motion does. And there is a visual change on Saturday because this holiday event is busy, and so this is blocking out availability for this day for the booking links. And Akiflow also has booking links but doesn't show the visual block, and neither does Google Calendar. So we can already see some visual differences between Akiflow and Motion and how they display information. But both tools are available on various devices. We're currently going through the web version. There are downloadable apps and work on various devices. Looking at Akiflow, if I drag a time slot on the calendar, I can choose for it to be a task, an event, or a slot. Slot is specific to Akiflow. A slot allows you to bring lots of tasks into one time slot. An event is just like an event inside of Google Calendar, and we can add a title, add guest, location, description, just like we would see in Google Calendar, and you can see there it is. That's the calendar it's going to be stored on. I can pick between the additional events, the personal, or any other calendars I've connected. That could be from Outlook. And I get the option to change the color, so let's make it blue. And so that event has been created, and when we go back to Google Calendar, you can see we've got the new event, it's got the blue color, and it's currently in the orange calendar because it is stored in this main calendar. If we go over to Motion, because it's synced to the same calendar account, you can see there is the new event. So if I change this to violet and save, let's also move this from 9:45 to 2:30. Now when I come back to Google, it's got the purple color, still in the orange calendar, and the time has been moved. You'll also notice Akiflow has synced that color from Google, so it's now purple inside of Akiflow. Before moving on to tasks, when we look at navigation inside of Akiflow, if I push the right arrow key, you can see this day is moving across because it's looking at the different days, and then it will switch the view depending on what we're in. So if I push D for the day, then move over, it will move to those different days. Push W and it'll go to the week view, and if we move across, then push T for today, it will come back to today. However, Motion doesn't seem to have this sort of navigation. We can change from the week to the day view, and when we're in the day view, we can then click left and right, but there doesn't seem to be keyboard shortcuts that I can find, making it a more manual process. But that does match the Google experience, because when you push arrow keys in Google, it doesn't do anything. You need to push the arrows to go back and forth in the weeks. Now, when it comes to task management in both of these tools, Motion is far more automated than Akiflow, but you can be manual inside of Motion, and you do have an element of AI integrations with Akiflow, which we'll go through in a second. But when we look in the Akiflow settings, you can see lock tasks means that it locks the task on the calendar. And when we come into Motion, we get the same option to show tasks on Google and Outlook Calendar or don't show them. What this means is if you create a task inside of one of those tools, so I've created a task inside of Akiflow, and you can see it's locked, so it's on the calendar. This new task is at 3 o'clock. Now inside of Google, I've got that task scheduled on the calendar at 3 o'clock. If I unlock this task from the calendar, it will no longer be scheduled on the Google Calendar. So it's still saved in Akiflow, but it's not shown on the source Google Calendar. And now that I'm showing tasks in Motion, it's actually showing all of the tasks that I already have. But if I create a task here and call it new task, save the task, you can see nothing is appearing on Google Calendar. But if I change this to show tasks on Google and Outlook Calendar and keep the task as free, now I can see all of those Motion tasks appearing inside of my Google Calendar and blocked in. And this is an example of where the word lock is used in different ways. In Akiflow, locking a task puts it on the calendar, whereas in Motion, locking a task removes the auto scheduling. You see in Motion, this task is locked, so it's not going to move this task with any of the auto scheduling. And now I'm not showing tasks from Motion inside of Google, none of the tasks are showing. So Akiflow, you have more flexibility with what shows and what doesn't show. which brings me to Motion's auto scheduling. If I unlock this task, you can see it's now moved the task somewhere else because it thinks that something else should be done first, which is review edit. And if we have a look at this task, there's actually a lot of information inside of a Motion task. So we've got the task title, we then have a description with editing options, we have a history of what's happened to this task, attachment options, the complete button at the top, and whether it's on track, and this relates to the project it's in, which is a difference in hierarchy. So in Motion, you have a workspace, a folder, then a project, which is where a task can be stored. So if we have a look in the left sidebar, we've got the workspace. I've got my private workspace. Then inside of the works folder, in that workspace, we have video project. And inside that video project is where the edit video task is stored. So when I click, you can see we've got the video project at the top, different stages of this project, and then here is the task, edit video. All of these columns that are currently showing is what we saw inside of the calendar. So when I jump back to the calendar, go to the edit video, here are all of those properties. So we've got the stage, assignee, which is me, status, priority, duration, minimum chunk, which is the minimum amount of time this task can be scheduled on the calendar, which is auto scheduling specific, the start date and the deadline. So if I change this priority to high, you can see I can now add a different deadline. So let's move this deadline out to the 23rd. And this could be a hard deadline or a soft deadline. If I change this to a hard deadline, you may have noticed that the auto scheduling is actually moving this task. So it's now scheduled at 3:15. When we have a look at the calendar, you can see it's then moved review edit beforehand, which doesn't really make much sense because I need to have done the edit before I review the edit. So what I can do is come into edit video, come down to blocking and add a dependency and say review edit. So the review edit needs to be done after this edit video task, and so now Morgan's recognized the dependency and put edit video beforehand. On the side of Akiflow, you still have folders. You can still have a project inside of a folder, and inside that project have tasks. But when you push the plan button, it is a manual planning. So you could plan it for today. You can see down the bottom for today. I can then drag it in and schedule it on the calendar, but I'm manually scheduling these tasks at certain times. And if I was to put script before research, there is no way for me to add a dependency for this to be automatically moved. But what I can do is ask Aki, which is an AI chatbot, and say move the research task before the script. So what it's done is it's moved the research task before the script. So there are elements of dependencies you can add in, but it's asking an AI chatbot to do it for you rather than it automatically being done according to the task details. That's why when we look at a task inside of Akiflow, there is far less information. But you can still have tags inside of Akiflow for tasks. And so as an example, if I add the personal tag to this published task, which is in the video project, and then I click on the personal tag, you can see we've got one task from the trampoline project and one task from the video project. So this allows me to filter a different view of the tasks just for those that are tagged. In Motion, you can't tag any of those tasks. If we go to projects and tasks, you would need to create a filter to look for tasks in projects with assignees or use any of the task details to try and filter out for the information. But then Motion also has docs. If we click on the AI agenda, you can see this is a doc that's automatically created every day with all of these tasks in. Some of these tasks I've deleted, which is why they're not found. But you could, if we go to the plus new button, create a task, create a doc, and then inside of this doc, it be treated like a tag. And so you can store those tasks in here. So I can create a new task or create a new project inside of this doc and have the information here. Which relates to AI employees. They can integrate with emails, into CRM systems, into the docs, into the projects, and help with essentially automated workflows in the background. So you can see I've connected my Gmail, and so it's going to have a look through emails and create tasks from that automatically, although this isn't as reliable as I would like it to be from my preferences. Akiflow doing something similar with their AI workflows. You can see overdue tasks, schedule preview, and you can create templates and things that work in the background. However, when we look at Akiflow's integrations, there aren't as many as Motion, and quite a few are via Zapier. You can see Google Tasks is via Zapier. That's why if we come back to Google, this task currently isn't being shown in Akiflow. When we come into Motion, there are far more integrations. You can see there are loads that you can connect, but when it comes to things like Google Tasks, you can't connect them directly. It needs to be through Zapier, which is similar to Akiflow. At the time of recording this video, Motion is $49 a month. That gives you one seat with 10,000 credits per month, and that gives you 5 integrations. Akiflow, on the other hand, is $19 a month. There is a 7-day free trial with Akiflow, and as you can see, a 7-day free trial inside of Motion. But Motion seems certainly more directed towards AI team use cases, so I would probably trial Motion with another team member or a friend so you can see how the interactions work with the auto scheduling, Akiflow being much more individually focused. So unless you're a team that trusts AI to automatically schedule your tasks, and you can add the information into the tasks so you don't get some odd suggestions as we saw earlier with the task dependencies, I would probably suggest using Akiflow and using Aki to do some of the automated work with their workflows. But personally, the planning assistance from AI in Akiflow isn't quite enough for me, which is where I find Morgan a nice balance between the two. It gives me some AI suggestions, but doesn't take full control over my calendar like Motion does. That's personal preference to me, but of course I do work for Morgan, so there is a bit of bias in there. But if you're interested to have a look, we have a 14-day free trial which you can access in the link in the description below.